Good morning. My name is Captain Ed Black. Law enforcement officers across the United States are facing challenges like never before with the ongoing war on cops that has gained momentum over the last few years. High-profile incidents resulting in the death of citizens at the hands of law enforcement, both just and unjust, have helped anti-police groups gain traction in their fight against law and order. Unfortunately, in law enforcement, the unjust actions of one or two officers can cause negative ripple effects across the country in our profession. One such type of officer that causes the most problems is called a gypsy cop. We've all heard the term. It's an officer who goes from department to department because they can't seem to stay out of trouble. Currently, there's no way to keep track of gypsy cops on a nationwide level, despite the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing recommending a national database be implemented in 2015. In April of 2020, Ben Grunwald and John Rappaport, two law school professors, published the first in-depth study of gypsy cops and possibly the largest quantitative study of police misconduct that's ever been conducted. What is certain as a result of this study is that problem officers who continue to wear a badge by jumping from department to department are a threat to the public, good officers, and law enforcement as a whole. Grunwald and Rappaport report three principal findings in their study. The first is that gypsy cops are fairly common. They're not hard to find. Second, fired officers who do look for employment at new agencies face a difficult time getting hired, and they usually end up at a smaller department with fewer resources. And third, gypsy cops are far more likely to be fired from their next job, according to the study, and they are also more likely to receive complaints filed against them for moral character violations, such as violent or sexual misconduct. One of the worst gypsy cops ever comes from right here in our state of Texas. His name is Michael Meisner. He has worked at 17 different law enforcement agencies in 18 years, despite being arrested multiple times. According to a 2019 article by attorney Caleb Grews, he describes the WFAA Dallas News report detailing the arrest of Meisner for possessing or promoting child pornography, among other charges. Although these charges were later dropped due to what has been described as an ongoing feud between the arresting officer and Meisner, his history of going from so many departments is an embarrassment to law enforcement. Eliminating gypsy cops would benefit every citizen, every department, and every officer, every good officer in the country. Citizens would benefit by having a much less chance of encountering an unprofessional, unethical officer. Law enforcement agencies would benefit from the removal of gypsy cops by receiving fewer citizen complaints. They would face less liability in reducing the likelihood of misconduct by officers and by having improved relationships with the citizens that they serve. There have been past attempts to solve the problem of gypsy cops. The state of Texas attempted to address the issue during the 79th legislature in 2005 with House Bill 2677. The bill created the Employment Termination Report, or what we know as the F5, and required agencies to report to TCOL the circumstances surrounding why an officer leaves an agency. The legislature had good intentions. However, law enforcement agencies quickly defeated the bill's purpose by continuing to allow bad officers to resign instead of being terminated, and then just filing the F5 as a general discharge. Law enforcement agencies across the country have become so fearful of civil lawsuits from officers that they do not want to risk terminating one when they can easily allow them to resign and move on and be somebody else's problem, regardless of the consequences to the public and the next agency. The solution to eliminating gypsy cops is relatively simple. We need a mandated national database with repercussions for the agency leaders who do not honestly report to the database. It should be accompanied by legislation that prohibits deals from being made when an officer is about to be terminated, and an updated employee termination report or an updated F5 to make reporting more detailed. The updated F5 should be protected by legislation that makes it a crime to enter false information on the document. The database program can be designed to prevent any type of discrimination or ethical abuses by requiring all information regarding an officer's employment termination to be entered into the database, which can be used to show the existence of racial, ethnic, and gender disparities by quantifying the data into customizable reports that can be searched. The program minimizes the possibility of implicit bias impacting any of the data because it forces law enforcement leaders to be held accountable for all of the data that they enter. Problem officers do not stop being problem officers simply because they change uniforms. There are documented individual officers who have worked at more than a dozen agencies in as many years, including the infamous officer Meisner, who has been employed with 17 departments in 18 years, despite being arrested numerous times. Gypsy cops have a documented and troubling history of going on to cause catastrophic events for citizens and law enforcement alike, and they need to be removed from our profession. Thank you for your time.